Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Today's story is titled, Be My Wife, Just Pretend. The millionaire doctor said, but his secret request stunned her. But what if a marriage that started as an act turned into the one thing neither of them expected: real love? Let us return to our main characters. Rain fell softly over the glass roof of St. Haven Medical Center as Maya Nguyen hurried down the quiet corridor. The fluorescent lights hummed above her, and the scent of antiseptic filled the air. Her scrubs were damp from the downpour outside, her shoes squeaking faintly with every step. She had been on her feet for 12 hours, covering extra shifts to pay for her mother's medication. At the far end of the hall, the ICU doors opened, revealing Dr. Ethan Cole, the hospital's youngest and most respected cardiac surgeon. He was tall, precise, with a face carved in calm authority. His reputation was as flawless as his tailored white coat. Yet that night, something in his expression was different, something restless. Maya, his voice was low but firm. Can I speak to you privately? Her pulse quickened. She followed him into his office, the door closing softly behind them. The room was immaculate, neat files, a faint scent of coffee, and a single silver ring resting on the desk. Ethan stood by the window, staring out at the storm that mirrored the tension in his eyes. I need your help, he began. She hesitated, unsure if she had done something wrong. Of course, doctor, what is it? He turned, meeting her gaze directly. Be my wife, just pretend. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. The clock on the wall ticked once, twice. Maya blinked, certain she had misheard. I am sorry. What did you say? You heard me right, Ethan said quietly. It is not about romance. It is an arrangement, a contract. Her mind raced. This was absurd. You want me to pretend to be your wife? Why me? Ethan drew a long breath. Because I trust you, and because I do not have time. Quote. He explained that the hospital's board, composed mostly of conservative investors, was pressuring him to appear settled before they approved his next expansion project, a chain of community heart clinics. Without their support, years of work could collapse. He needed a wife on paper, someone honest, someone the board could respect. Maya stared at him, speechless. The rain outside drummed harder against the window. And in return, she whispered, I will cover your mother's surgery in full, he said simply. No conditions, no delay. Her throat tightened. The words cut through her defenses like a blade. For months she had begged for extensions, loans, even extra night shifts. Nothing had worked, and now this. She looked down at the silver ring on the desk. It glinted under the lamplight, small but weighty, like temptation itself. You are serious, she said softly. Ethan nodded. Completely. Quote. She let out a shaky laugh, halfway between disbelief and panic. You really think this will solve your problem? It will buy me time, he answered. And maybe it will save more lives. That is what matters. Maya's hands trembled. Every instinct told her to walk out. But behind her eyes, she saw her mother lying in that hospital bed, struggling for breath, the beeping monitors, the fear of losing the only family she had left. Finally, she exhaled and met his gaze. If I agree, this stays professional. No false promises, no blurred lines. Ethan's lips curved faintly, a shadow of relief. Of course. I would not expect anything else. He picked up the ring and placed it gently in her palm. We will sign the paperwork in the morning. Just think of it as a formality. Maya closed her fingers around the ring. It felt cold against her skin, almost unreal. She whispered, a formality that could change everything. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Inside, 2 lives had just stepped across an invisible line from strangers bound by duty to a story neither of them could yet see coming. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds of Maya's small apartment, slicing across stacks of unpaid bills and the worn photo of her mother, smiling from a hospital bed. She had barely slept. The ring lay on the nightstand, catching the light. Every time she looked at it, her heart twisted. It was not love, it was survival. By 9 o'clock, she was standing once again in Dr. Ethan Cole's office. He was already there, crisp white coat replaced with a tailored navy suit. The shift from surgeon to businessman was startling. Without a word, he slid a folder across the desk. Inside were printed papers, each stamped with legal seals. "It outlines everything," he said evenly. "Duration, boundaries, financial terms." Maya flipped through the pages, her throat dry. Each paragraph felt heavier than the last. "6 months?" she asked quietly. "You said one." Ethan met her eyes. "The board postponed their final vote. I need you until then. You will attend a few public events, charity galas, and interviews. Nothing else changes." "And my mother's surgery?" she pressed. "The payment will be processed this afternoon," he answered. "She will be admitted to St. Haven by tomorrow." Her breath caught. Gratitude and guilt collided inside her. She wanted to thank him, but the words stuck. She picked up the pen. For a long moment, her hand hovered over the line. Then she signed. Ethan reached into a small velvet box and revealed a second ring, simpler, elegant. He held it out without ceremony. "For appearances," he said, "wear it whenever we are in public." Maya slipped it on. The metal felt cold, like a secret she could not take back. "And what will people think when they find out?" she asked. "They will not," Ethan replied. His voice was steady, but his eyes flickered with something unspoken. "I trust you to be discreet." Later that afternoon, a black car waited for her outside the hospital. The driver opened the door, greeting her with a polite nod. She hesitated only a moment before stepping in. The car glided through downtown traffic, passing glass towers and cafes full of people whose lives were far simpler than hers. The mansion stood on the city's north ridge, a vast stone estate surrounded by trees that whispered in the wind. The iron gates opened automatically as they approached, revealing the manicured garden and the wide marble steps leading up to double oak doors. Maya stepped out, clutching her bag. "This is where you live?" she asked quietly. Ethan nodded. "For now. It feels less like a home and more like a museum." Clo. Inside, the halls were lined with portraits, each ancestor looking down with unspoken judgment. The air smelled faintly of cedar and polished silver. A housekeeper appeared, greeting them with a courteous smile. Ethan introduced Maya as Mrs. Cole. The words sounded foreign, too heavy for the air between them. Her room was on the second floor, a space that felt larger than her entire apartment. The view overlooked the garden and a small fountain where birds gathered. On the nightstand lay a handwritten note in Ethan's precise handwriting. "Dinner at 7. Formal. Do not worry, just be yourself." When the clock struck 7, she walked into the grand dining hall. A long mahogany table stretched the length of the room, set with crystal glasses and white candles. Ethan sat at the far end, posture straight, his suit immaculate. "I hope you found your room comfortable," he said. "It is beautiful," she replied, her voice steady but soft. "Almost too beautiful." Quote. He gave a faint smile. "Beauty is nothing without purpose. Eat, please." Dinner was quiet at first, the sound of silverware against porcelain filling the silence. Maya stole a glance at him, noticing the faint tension in his shoulders, the exhaustion in his eyes. He looked like a man who carried too much alone. Halfway through the meal, Ethan's phone buzzed. He ignored it once, twice, then finally answered. His tone shifted, controlled but cold. "Tell them I will not attend without my wife," he said into the phone. Maya's fork froze midair. Wife. The word felt like a costume she had not learned to wear yet. After he hung up, he caught her look. "It is the hospital charity gala next week," he explained. "They expect both of us there." She nodded slowly. "Then, I guess I have a lot to learn." He leaned back, studying her for a long moment. "You will do fine, Maya. You are honest. That is rare in my world." Quo. Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. She looked away, tracing the rim of her glass. The room felt suddenly too large, the air too still. When dinner ended, Ethan stood and walked her to the staircase. "Rest well," he said softly. "Tomorrow we begin your orientation." She gave a polite nod. "Good night, doctor." He hesitated, then replied, "It is Ethan, at least when we are at home." For the first time that day, Maya smiled. "Good night, Ethan." Gufter. He watched as she disappeared up the stairs, her footsteps fading into the quiet. Alone again, he turned toward the window, staring at the rain-soaked garden beyond the glass. He had built his life on precision, discipline, and control. But tonight, as thunder rolled distantly, he realized something had shifted. This arrangement, what was supposed to be simple, logical, suddenly felt like the beginning of something dangerously human. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the Cole mansion, washing the marble floors in soft gold. Maya stood before a full-length mirror, smoothing the navy dress laid out for her. The stylist, a cheerful woman named Carol, adjusted the pearl earrings and murmured, "You will do fine, Mrs. Cole." The title still made Maya's stomach twist. Downstairs, Ethan waited beside the grand staircase, dressed in a gray suit and a calm expression that barely masked his tension. "We have a long day ahead," he said. "I will introduce you to the foundation team this morning." The drive to the hospital was quiet. Outside, the city pulsed with its usual rhythm, honking cars, rushing people, the blur of umbrellas crossing wet sidewalks. Inside the car, silence stretched like glass. Maya glanced sideways at Ethan, noticing the faint crease between his brows. "You always look like you are solving a puzzle," she said softly. He glanced at her, almost surprised by the comment. "Medicine is nothing but puzzles," he replied. "Sometimes, people are too." At St. Haven Foundation's office, photographers were waiting. Flashbulbs popped as they stepped from the car. Ethan placed a careful hand on the small of her back, guiding her forward. His touch was steady, professional, but it sent a strange current through her all the same. "Smile," he whispered without looking at her. She did, though her heart hammered in her chest. Inside, they met the hospital board, a dozen people seated behind polished mahogany. Ethan's tone shifted, cool, commanding, every word measured. He introduced Maya as the best decision of my life, and for a moment, even she believed the warmth in his voice. When the meeting ended, one of the board members, a woman named Linda Shaw, approached Maya with a knowing smile. "You are full of surprises, Mrs. Cole. We had no idea Ethan could keep a secret this big." Maya smiled politely. "Neither did I." By the time they returned to the car, she could finally breathe again. "You are good at pretending," she said lightly. Ethan looked out the window, his reflection sharp in the glass. "Pretending is easy," he said. "It is believing that is hard." That night, after dinner, Ethan led her to the library, a grand room lined with books and soft lamps. "There is one more part of this arrangement," he said, pulling out a thin folder. "Public commitments, interviews, photo sessions, and one gala every month. You will need to be familiar with some medical terms, at least for appearances." Maya took the folder. "You want me to learn your world," she said. "I want you to be comfortable in it," he corrected. Over the next few days, the mansion became both classroom and cage. She spent mornings reading about hospital programs, afternoons walking through the gardens alone. The housekeepers were kind but distant, treating her like porcelain. Every evening, Ethan and Maya shared dinner, brief, polite, wrapped in silence that grew heavier with each night. One evening, as rain lashed the windows, the power flickered. Maya lit a candle on the dining table while Ethan checked the breaker. When he returned, his shirt sleeves were rolled up, a faint smudge of dust on his wrist. For the first time, he looked almost ordinary. "You are staring," he said quietly, setting down the flashlight. "Sorry," she murmured. "I just realized you are human after all." He laughed, a low, genuine sound that startled them both. "Do not tell anyone. It might ruin my reputation." The power came back a few minutes later, but the air between them had shifted. It was lighter, almost fragile. Days passed, and soon the night of the first charity gala arrived. Maya's reflection in the mirror took her breath away. The silver gown hugged her frame perfectly, her hair swept into a soft twist. For a woman who had spent years in hospital scrubs, the transformation felt unreal. When she descended the staircase, Ethan was waiting below, fastening his cufflinks. He looked up and froze. "You look—" He stopped himself, clearing his throat. "Elegant." "Thank you," she said, trying not to blush. The gala was held in the ballroom of a luxury hotel, glittering with chandeliers and laughter. The air smelled of champagne and polished marble. As they entered, conversation rippled through the crowd. Ethan kept his arm lightly around her waist, guiding her with quiet confidence. A reporter approached. "Dr. Cole, we heard you recently married. Tell us, how did you meet your wife?" For a split second, Maya froze. But then she remembered his note, "Be yourself." She smiled. "I was working a long night shift at St. Haven," she said. "He came in asking for coffee. I accidentally spilled it on his coat. I suppose he has not forgiven me since." The crowd laughed, and Ethan looked down at her, amused and impressed. "She still owes me that coffee," he said smoothly. The moment passed like magic. They moved through the night like a well-rehearsed duet, each glance perfectly timed, each gesture convincing. And yet, deep down, something in Maya's chest began to tremble. Because every time Ethan smiled at her in front of others, part of her wished it was real. After the final toast, they returned home long past midnight. Maya slipped off her heels by the door, her feet aching. Ethan loosened his tie, looking tired but thoughtful. "You handled yourself perfectly," he said. "So did you," she replied. He paused at the bottom of the stairs. "Good night, Maya." She met his gaze, her voice quiet but steady. "Good night, Ethan." He turned away, climbing the stairs slowly. Alone in the hallway, Maya touched the ring on her finger. It had begun as a symbol of survival, a cold piece of metal binding her to a deal. But now, it felt heavier, warmer somehow. She could not explain why. Outside, the last traces of rain faded into silence. Inside, two people who had promised to feel nothing were beginning to lose that fight. The days after the gala moved in quiet rhythm. Morning sunlight filled the marble halls, and the mansion seemed softer, almost alive. For the first time since the contract began, Maya no longer felt like a guest in a stranger's home. She cooked breakfast some mornings, to the surprise of the kitchen staff. Ethan would walk in, still half asleep, and find her standing by the stove, hair tied loosely, a soft smile on her face. "You do not have to do that," he said one morning, watching her pour coffee into a mug. "I know," she answered, "but I like doing it. It makes this place feel less like a museum." Quote. He took the cup from her hand and studied her for a moment. "You are changing things around here," he said quietly. She smiled. Maybe it needed a little change. At work, Ethan's colleagues noticed the difference too. The once distant doctor now smiled more easily, and the staff whispered that marriage had softened him. Maya visited the hospital often, helping with charity projects for the foundation. Patients adored her warmth. Nurses said she reminded them of the reason they had joined the profession in the first place. One afternoon, Maya found Ethan in his office, staring at the framed blueprints for the community heart clinic. Papers were scattered across the desk. "The board still has not approved it?" she asked. "They keep postponing," he said, rubbing his temples. "They are worried about funding, about my personal stability, about everything except the patients who need it." Cray. She walked closer and rested a hand on the desk. "Maybe they need to see you as more than a surgeon or a figurehead. They need to see the man who actually cares." He looked up at her, surprised. "And what would that man do?" "Invite them," she said. "Let them visit the children's ward. Show them why this matters." For the first time in days, he smiled. "You sound like you have done this before." "I used to convince donors for the hospital's community drives," she said. "Sometimes people just need to feel the reason before they sign the papers." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then let us do it your way." That weekend, he followed her plan. The board members toured the hospital, visiting patients recovering from heart surgeries. Maya stayed by Ethan's side, greeting everyone with calm sincerity. When a little boy named Ben reached out to hold her hand, the moment was caught by a photographer. The next morning, the picture was on the front page of the local newspaper under the headline, "Dr. Cole and his wife bring hope to St. Haven." When Ethan saw it, he looked at her with quiet admiration. "You have done more in one afternoon than I have in a year," he said. Maya shook her head. "You just needed someone to remind you that hearts are not only for medicine." The following evening, they shared dinner outside on the terrace. The air was cool, the city lights glittering in the distance. For once, there were no rules, no board meetings, no pretending. They talked about childhood dreams, about the first time each of them saw snow, about fears they never voiced aloud. Maya told him about her mother's recovery. The surgery had gone well, and the doctors expected a full recovery. Ethan listened quietly, a soft pride flickering in his eyes. "You deserve peace, Maya," he said. "After everything you have carried." "Chloe, so do you," she replied. "But peace does not come to people who never stop working." He chuckled. "You know me too well." A pause settled between them, comfortable and heavy at once. He looked at her then, the candlelight catching the faint gold in his eyes. "Sometimes I forget this is not real," he admitted. "It feels different now." Her breath caught. "Do not say things like that," she whispered. "We both know how this ends." "I know," he said softly, "but knowing does not make it easier." For a long moment, neither spoke. The night wind brushed through the garden, and the distant sound of traffic hummed like a heartbeat. The next morning, the illusion broke. When Maya walked into the hospital lobby, she saw two reporters waiting by the reception desk. One of them lifted a camera. "Mrs. Cole, a quick question. Is it true your marriage with Dr. Cole is just a publicity stunt?" Maya froze. "What are you talking about?" The reporter's partner held up a tablet showing a headline, "Anonymous source claims Dr. Ethan Cole's marriage is a contract deal. Beneath it were blurred photos, one of her signing documents, another of her leaving the hospital alone. Her heart pounded. "Who told you this?" They did not answer. By the time she reached Ethan's office, her hands were trembling. He was already there, standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear. When he hung up, she saw the exhaustion on his face. "The board called," he said. "They want an emergency meeting tonight." "Ethan," she whispered. "Someone found out. They have photos." He looked at her, jaw tight. "I will handle it, but they will drag your name through the mud," she said, voice shaking. "They will say you lied." He stepped closer, his tone calm but distant. "This was my decision, Maya. You did nothing wrong. Stay out of it." The words hit harder than she expected. "So that is it? You are just shutting me out now?" "This is damage control," he said, avoiding her eyes. "It is better if you keep your distance until it settles." Her throat ached. "After everything, I am just part of the problem again." Ethan did not respond. He turned away, the weight of his silence louder than any argument. That night, Maya sat in her room, staring at the silver ring on her finger. The contract had promised boundaries, protection, and distance, but it had never warned her about heartbreak. She slipped the ring off and placed it on the nightstand. Downstairs, Ethan sat alone in the library, the headline glowing on his phone screen. The storm outside rattled the windows, echoing the chaos inside him. He thought of her empty chair at dinner, her laughter in the kitchen, the way she looked at him as if she saw the man behind the surgeon. He closed his eyes, realizing the truth he had avoided for weeks. The marriage had begun as an act, but somewhere along the way, it had stopped being pretend. The following morning, the mansion felt hollow. The sunlight that once made the marble glow now only revealed emptiness. Maya had left before dawn, leaving behind a short note on the dining table. "Thank you for everything. Please do not worry about me. I will find my own way." Ethan stood there reading the words again and again, each line cutting deeper. He wanted to call her, to explain, but his phone was already full of messages from the board and reporters. The story had exploded overnight. Every news outlet was speculating about their marriage. The words "fake wife" and "scandal" were plastered across screens. At the hospital, cameras flashed as he arrived. A crowd of journalists swarmed the entrance. "Dr. Cole, is it true you paid your wife to marry you?" one shouted. "Was this all a publicity stunt?" another asked. Ethan said nothing. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed ahead. Inside, his assistant tried to speak, but he waved her off. "Reschedule everything," he said. "I need time to fix this." That night, the board convened. 12 men and women sat across from him in the conference room, their faces stern. Linda Shaw spoke first. "Ethan, this foundation runs on credibility. If the rumors are true, we may have no choice but to suspend you from the directorship." "They are not true," he said firmly. "My marriage was private. No law was broken." "Perception matters more than truth," she replied coldly. "Donations have already dropped. Our partners want answers." He felt the walls closing in. Every argument he made was drowned by their accusations. When the meeting ended, the board demanded a public statement by morning. Ethan walked out into the rain, his suit soaked within seconds. He could save his reputation or he could tell the truth, but either choice meant losing something he cared about. Meanwhile, Maya returned to her old apartment, the one she had left months ago. It smelled of dust and quiet. Her mother was still recovering at the rehabilitation center, far from the noise of the scandal. Maya sat by the window, watching the rain streak the glass. Her phone buzzed, constantly calls from reporters, messages from coworkers. She turned it off and let the silence swallow her. For the first time in weeks, she could breathe. But peace came with an ache that refused to fade. Every corner of the apartment reminded her of Ethan, the way he smiled when she made coffee, the warmth in his voice when he said her name. It was foolish to miss a man whose love had never been promised, yet her heart refused to listen. 2 days later, she was walking home from the grocery store when a television in the shop window caught her attention. The headline flashed. "Dr. Ethan Cole speaks out." Her hands froze around the paper bag as his face appeared on screen. He stood behind a podium at a press conference, the cameras flashing like lightning. He looked exhausted but resolute. "I owe the public an explanation," he began. "Yes. My marriage to Maya Nguyen began as a contractual arrangement, but what I will not allow anyone to say is that it was done for deceit or personal gain. Maya saved my mother's life when others gave up. She stood by me when no one else would. If there is any mistake here, it is mine, because I treated her like a means to an end instead of what she truly is, the best thing that ever happened to me." The reporters erupted with questions, but Ethan continued, voice unwavering. If this costs me my position, so be it. But I will not let the woman who taught me compassion bear my shame. Maya stood frozen on the sidewalk. The world around her blurred the traffic, the voices, the noise. She could only hear his words echoing in her mind. By the next morning, the video had gone viral. Social media exploded with sympathy and praise. People called it the most honest confession ever seen from a CEO. Donations to the foundation doubled. The board, under public pressure, reinstated him within 24 hours. That evening, a black car stopped outside Maya's apartment. Ethan stepped out, rain dripping from his coat. He looked up at her window, uncertain if she would even open the door. When she did, he stood there speechless for a moment. "You should not be here," she said softly. "I had to be," he replied. "Not as your employer, not as your fake husband, just as me." She folded her arms, her voice trembling. "You told me to stay away." "I know," he said, "and I was wrong. I thought I could protect you by keeping you out of it. But all I did was prove how much I needed you." Maya looked away, tears welling in her eyes. "You cannot just walk back and fix everything with words." "I am not asking for forgiveness," he said quietly. "I am asking for a chance to start over with no contracts, no lies." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver ring. It glimmered in the dim hallway light. This time it means something real. She stared at it, her heart pounding. "Ethan, people will talk. They always will. Let them," he said. "They can say what they want. I just want the truth between us." Quote. The silence stretched. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper. Maya took a slow breath and stepped closer. Her hand trembled as she touched the ring, then met his eyes. "If we do this again," she whispered, "it has to be real." "It already is," he said. He slid the ring onto her finger, and this time it fit perfectly. Later that night, they returned to the mansion. The lights glowed warmly, as if welcoming them home. In the quiet dining hall where everything had once begun, Ethan poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to her. "No more pretending," he said. Maya smiled softly, her eyes glistening. "Then let us begin for real." Outside, the city lights shimmered like stars reflected in the rain. Inside, 2 people who had once signed a contract finally understood what it meant to love without conditions. The story that began as a transaction had become a promise, one built not on obligation, but on choice. A week later, the world had quieted, but inside the Cole mansion, something new had taken root. The air no longer carried the tension of pretense. It felt lighter, warmer, real. Maya's laughter, once hesitant, now filled the halls like music. Ethan caught himself smiling at the smallest things, her voice echoing from the kitchen, the way she left her sketchbook open on the garden table, her humming while she watered the plants. Life had resumed its rhythm at St. Haven Medical Center as well. The staff welcomed Maya with genuine affection, and patients recognized her from the viral interview. Some called her the heart of St. Haven. Ethan often watched from a distance, pride softening his usual composure. The woman he had once hired to save his reputation had ended up saving him instead. One evening, after a long day at the hospital, Ethan walked into the garden where Maya sat sketching. The sunset painted her face in gold and amber. He stopped behind her, quietly watching the image taking shape on the page, a portrait of the clinic they had fought so hard to build. "You captured it perfectly," he said, his voice low and warm. She turned, smiling. "It still feels like a dream, does it not?" He sat beside her. "Dreams are fragile, but this one feels solid." They sat in silence for a while, the scent of jasmine filling the air. Then Ethan said softly, "There is something I need to tell you." Maya looked at him, curious. "What is it?" "The board has offered me a position overseas," he said. "A chance to expand the foundation across Europe. It is everything I have worked for." Her smile faded, but she nodded. "That is incredible, Ethan. You deserve it." He hesitated. "It would mean being away for a year, maybe more." She closed her sketchbook slowly. "And you want to go?" "I do not know," he admitted. "I want to build something meaningful, but leaving now, it feels like I would be walking away from the only thing that ever mattered." Maya's gaze softened. "You will not lose what is real, Ethan. You will only lose it if you stop choosing it." He reached for her hand, fingers brushing against her ring. "Then tell me to stay," he said quietly. She met his eyes and whispered, "I would never hold you back from who you are meant to be. Just promise you will come back." Ethan exhaled, torn between duty and devotion. You have no idea how hard it is not to promise something I cannot control. Then promise me this, she said, squeezing his hand. Wherever you go, let what we built this foundation, this love be the reason you keep going. He nodded, emotion flickering across his face. I can promise that. The following weeks passed quickly. Ethan prepared for his trip, working late to finalize the expansion. Maya spent her days volunteering at the clinic and her nights painting. On his last evening in the city, she found him in his study, packing a few books into his briefcase. You are really leaving tomorrow, she said quietly. He looked up and smiled faintly. For a while, but I will be back before you know it. Quote. She walked closer and placed a small envelope on the desk. Open this when you miss home. He frowned slightly but nodded. You always have a surprise ready. The next morning, Maya stood at the airport beside him. The terminal buzzed with announcements and the soft murmur of travelers. Ethan turned to her one last time. You changed everything, Maya, he said. The man boarding that plane is not the same one who made that foolish deal months ago. She smiled through the ache in her chest. Good, that means it was worth it. When he boarded, she stayed until the plane disappeared into the clouds. Her eyes lingered on the empty sky, whispering, "Come back safe." Months passed. Maya poured her energy into her art and the community projects they had started together. She led fundraisers, opened a children's art wing at the clinic, and often received letters from Ethan updates filled with sketches of cities he visited, stories of patients he met, and always one line at the end. Still yours no matter the distance. One winter afternoon, she received a package with no sender's name. Inside was a framed photo of the first clinic ribbon cutting in Paris, and a note that read, Phase 1 complete. Coming home soon. Her heart raced. She looked at the clock, then at the garden, now dusted with snow. As if on cue, headlights appeared through the gate. The front door opened, and there he was, Ethan, standing in the cold, a suitcase in one hand and the familiar warmth in his eyes. You are early, she said, barely holding back tears. I could not wait another day, he replied. She ran into his arms, and for the first time since he had left, everything felt right again. Later that evening, they stood together in the garden under a string of soft lights. Ethan took her hands and said, I kept your letter with me the whole time. It said, home is not a place, it is a person. You were right. She smiled, tears glistening. And you found your way back. He nodded, pulling her closer. For good this time. As snow began to fall, he reached into his coat pocket and revealed a small velvet box. No contracts, no terms, no pretending, just forever. Lar. Maya's breath caught as he knelt. Ethan, he smiled. Maya Nguyen, will you marry me for real this time? Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, yes. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, the garden lights reflected like tiny stars around them. It was the same silver ring that had once symbolized duty, now reborn as a promise of truth. They held each other in the quiet night, the city lights shimmering beyond the trees. What began as a transaction had come full circle, not an arrangement, not a performance, but a love story that had finally found its heart. Spring returned to St. Haven with the smell of rain and blooming magnolias. The city that once watched their scandal now whispered their redemption. It had been 3 months since Ethan's return, and life had found a calm rhythm that neither of them took for granted. Every morning they walked through the hospital garden together before rounds began. Maya carried a notebook filled with designs for the new art therapy wing, while Ethan checked his schedule for surgeries and meetings. They moved easily beside each other now. No more distance, no more hesitation. The people who had once doubted them now smiled when they passed. The story of the fake marriage that became real had turned into a legend within the hospital walls. Donors returned, new clinics opened, and every press feature about Ethan ended with the same line. Sometimes the heart needs healing too. One Friday evening, they hosted a small gathering at the foundation hall to celebrate the opening of the new wing. The space glowed with soft light, the air filled with laughter and the faint hum of a piano. Former patients, nurses, and community members mingled as Maya unveiled a painting, a large canvas depicting 2 hands intertwined beneath a silver ring. The crowd applauded, but her eyes were only on Ethan. He approached the stage and took the microphone. This foundation was built on medicine, he said, but it survived because of compassion. Maya reminded me that every life we touch leaves an imprint on ours. He turned to her, voice steady, and she reminded me that healing is not only for patients, it is for all of us. The applause was soft but heartfelt. Ethan stepped down from the stage, taking Maya's hand as they moved through the crowd. You see, he whispered, Now they know what I always knew: you were never part of a lie. You were the truth I was too proud to see. Later, as the guests began to leave, they walked outside to the terrace. The city lights shimmered below, and the fountain rippled in the moonlight. Maya leaned on the railing, the spring air brushing against her face. "Do you ever think about how strange it all was?" she asked. "How it started with a contract and ended here?" Ethan stood beside her, quiet for a moment. "I think about it every day," he said, "because it reminds me that even mistakes can lead us to the right place." She smiled softly. "The best mistake we ever made." He laughed, the sound deep and real. "Exactly that." Quote. They stood in silence, listening to the water, the hum of the city, the pulse of life continuing all around them. There was no need for grand declarations anymore. The peace between them said everything words could not. Inside the hall, the lights dimmed, leaving only the glow of the new mural, a depiction of the hospital and its people, with one small detail in the corner, a silver ring resting on an open hand. It was Maya's final brushstroke, her way of closing the circle. Ethan reached for her hand. "Ready to go home?" She nodded. "Always." As they walked down the steps together, the night air carried the scent of jasmine and rain, just like the first night they had met. The difference now was simple and beautiful. There was no pretending left, only love that had been tested, forgiven, and proven real. And as the camera of life pulled back on the quiet city street, their laughter faded into the night. Two souls who had started as strangers in a deal, now partners in something far greater. What began as a contract had become a vow, and this time it was forever. Summer arrived with long golden days and soft evening winds. The mansion that once felt cold now echoed with life voices, laughter, and music drifting through open windows. Ethan and Maya had settled into a rhythm that felt both ordinary and miraculous. For the first time, neither of them was living for appearances. They were simply living. On a quiet Sunday morning, the two of them sat on the porch overlooking the garden. Ethan was reading reports from the hospital's newest outreach program, and Maya was sketching a mural for the children's wing. Her pencil moved in soft arcs, her concentration deep, the sunlight catching in her hair. Ethan looked up from his papers and smiled. "You have that same look every time you draw," he said. "The rest of the world disappears." Maya laughed lightly. "And you have that same look every time you work? You forget there is a world outside the hospital." He folded the papers and leaned back. "That used to be true," he said. "Now there is you." She glanced up at him, warmth blooming in her chest. "And you still say things that make it hard to focus." "Cool." He chuckled, standing to pour 2 glasses of lemonade. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and cut grass. Everything about that morning felt effortless. But deep inside, Ethan was holding something he had been planning for weeks. That evening, he asked her to walk with him. They took the familiar path around the garden, the one lined with soft lights and white roses. At the center stood the old fountain, the same place where he had once sat alone before she entered his life. Now it was where everything had changed. He stopped and faced her. "Do you remember the first night we met?" he asked. "The rain, the hospital corridor, the silence?" Maya smiled. "I remember thinking you were the most impossible man I had ever met. And you were the most stubborn woman I had ever met," he said with a grin. "You still are." She laughed softly. "And yet, you still married me." "I would do it again," he said. 1,000 times. Quote. From his pocket, he pulled a small envelope sealed with gold wax. "This is for you," he said. Inside was a single sheet of paper, an official document bearing both their names. She looked up at him, puzzled. "What is this?" "The board voted to transfer ownership of the new art therapy wing," he explained. "It belongs to you now. You started it. You inspired it. It should have your name." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, I do not need this." "I know," he said gently, "but I need you to have it. You gave me my heart back. The least I can do is give you yours." For a long moment, she could not speak. She reached out and wrapped her arms around him, holding on as if words could not hold enough meaning. "You are impossible," she whispered. He smiled into her hair. "And you are the reason I am better." That night, the two of them stood together under the warm light of the garden lamps. The fountain shimmered beside them, the sound of water soft and steady. For once there was no noise from the world outside, no rumors, no judgment, no fear, just peace. Ethan took her hand and kissed it gently. "Do you realize," he said quietly, "that everything we went through led us right here?" Maya nodded. "It was not easy," she said, "but nothing real ever is." They looked out over the garden, the night wrapped around them like a promise. The future was no longer something to fear or control. It was simply something to build, together one honest day at a time. And as the wind stirred the roses, their laughter carried softly into the evening. A reminder that love does not begin perfectly. It becomes perfect when it endures. Autumn came quietly to St. Haven. The leaves turned amber and gold, and the air carried the scent of rain mixed with wood smoke. The Cole mansion, once a symbol of loneliness, now overflowed with warmth and noise. Laughter drifted from the kitchen, where Maya was baking apple pie for the staff, and Ethan was setting up a projector in the living room for movie night. It had been a year since their real wedding, a small ceremony held in the hospital garden surrounded by friends, patients, and staff. There were no reporters, no headlines, no contracts. Just a simple exchange of vows under a string of lights. When Ethan slipped the silver ring on her finger again, the same one that had started it all, everyone clapped through tears. Now, as the evening light faded through the tall windows, Ethan called from the living room. "Maya, you are going to miss the opening scene." "Give me 1 minute," she answered, carrying the warm pie in her hands. When she walked in, he was waiting on the couch, 2 mugs of cocoa beside him. The projector flickered to life, casting golden light across the room. Maya sat down beside him, her head resting against his shoulder. They watched quietly for a few minutes before she spoke. "Do you ever think about how different life could have been?" Ethan smiled. "Every day. But I would not change a thing. Even the mistakes brought me here." She chuckled. "You mean the biggest mistake of your life, asking a nurse to marry you?" He looked down at her, his expression soft. "No," he said. "That was the first time I got something right." "Go?" Maya laughed, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You always know how to ruin a serious moment." "I am a doctor," he said, pretending to sound serious. "It is part of the treatment." They both laughed until their sides ached. The movie played in the background, but neither of them really watched. The house around them felt alive, warm lights, quiet music, the hum of a place finally at peace. Later that night, Ethan walked with her to the garden. The fountain still sparkled beneath the soft glow of lanterns, and the roses they had planted that summer were beginning to bloom again. He stopped near the water, his reflection shimmering beside hers. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think happiness was something you earned, after everything else was perfect." "And now?" she asked. "Now I know it is something you build from imperfect pieces," he said. "Like us." She smiled, slipping her hand into his. "Then I guess we did a pretty good job." He turned toward her, eyes warm and certain. "We did more than that, Maya. We turned a contract into a life." The wind rustled through the trees, scattering golden leaves across the path. Maya leaned against him, her voice barely above a whisper. "So this is forever." "It always was," he replied. As the camera of life seemed to pull back one last time, the image was simple. 2 people standing in the golden light of evening, holding hands beside the fountain that had witnessed their journey. The sound of laughter echoed softly, fading into the rhythm of the city beyond. The story that had begun with a desperate proposal and a signed contract ended not with wealth or power, but with something far greater: 2 hearts that had learned how to heal together. And as the final line of their story settled into the quiet night, Ethan's voice whispered the truth they had both come to believe. No more pretending, just love, only love.